Good afternoon. Could I ask that nobody else leaves, please? I appreciate it's late in the day and there is alcohol outside, but they've stopped serving alcohol just for this talk, so do feel free to stay. So thank you very much indeed for staying in this temperature when there is alcohol outside. What I'd like to do is, in the next 15 minutes, explain to you our approach as Ashoka and friends towards a world in which everyone is becoming a change maker, a world in which everyone is becoming empowered to live for a better world. And what I'm going to ask you is if you would mind participating, please. Would anyone not mind participating? I'm going to take that as people, I don't know how that question was terrible. I'm going to assume that means you're okay participating. Because I'd also like to test some new software out, which is, has anyone heard of CVR, Crowd Voice Recognition Software? Okay, we're going to be trying that out here, but it will require your participation. Okay, so what's our approach to empowering everyone to live for a better world? Let's think about how we can backcast from the question, what is a better world? So the first thing I'd like you to do is turn to your neighbor, please. If you have a neighbor, find a neighbor, and just see if you can find one or two words that encapsulate your idea of a better world. What is a better world? Just in 30 seconds, please. Okay. Has everyone got a word or two? All right, now we're going to test out this software, and it does require everyone's participation. So what I'd like you to do on the fourth beat, so that's 1, 2, 3, is to shout out your one or two key words. And hopefully the software will pick this up. Okay. Does everyone get that? So on the fourth beat. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Let's see what the software came up with. Look at that. Brilliant. Thank you. That worked perfectly. So, the software is always right. Yeah. So never question the computer. Okay. So the idea of a better world is obviously a very complex idea. Lots of people will often talk about peace and love, and some people will talk about circular economies and all of that stuff. Essentially, it typically boils down to ideas around personal, social, cultural, economic, and environmental well-being, or quality of life. The words thriving and flourishing are often very common. And often there are conversations around, well, that's all well and good, but what about the fact that we live in a world of unprecedented volatility and complexity and hyperconnectivity? What about the fact that we live in a world that now includes digital life, not just real world life? How do you incorporate all of that stuff? What we don't say as Ashoka is this is a definitive version of a better world, but rather we encourage people to define a better world for themselves. So that's very much a work in progress, and our approach then is helping communities define a better world for themselves through deep conversation. What does it mean then to live for a better world? Now, central to this idea is the idea that we are all fundamentally interconnected, and that because we are interconnected, the quality of our lives unfolds through every human action, from moment to moment. So interconnectedness and human agency are central to our theory of change. And what this suggests then is somebody who is living for a better world is being deeply human. They are being empathic, for example. They are being in a way that is contributing to our collective well-being. So let's try the software again. Let's see if it does any better. Turn to your neighbor again, please, and just ask the question, what are the deepest human qualities that define a person who is living for a better world? What are the deepest human qualities that define a person who lives for a better world? It could be, as a clue, being empathic. Again, 1 minute, please. Okay. Are we ready again? Let's test the software. So on the on the fourth beat, if you could again shout out, make it very clear so the software can hear. 1, 2, 3. Try that again. 1, 2, 3. That's better. Thank you. There you go. It's worked perfectly again. So when you ask this question, pretty much everywhere in the world, you will find a very common set of deep human qualities that people believe are central to someone who lives for a better world. Empathy, self-awareness, mindfulness, thoughtfulness, wisdom, curiosity, adaptability, purposefulness, proactivity, creativity, collaboration, resilience, etc., etc. And the list does go on. These are some examples. There's a key idea here, though, which is that somebody who is living for a better world is, from moment to moment, being empathic, being creative, being resilient. So this is about human being. And notice how this idea resonates with lots of the conversations that we've heard earlier in the day. This move from machine skills as a focus of education to human being as the focus of learning. So someone then who is empowered to live for a better world has found their powers of empathy and self-awareness and creativity and all of these deep human qualities. They've found their power of being empathic. The question then in our approach is to ask, well, how do you become empathic? How do you become creative? How do you become empowered to live for a better world? This idea that to be empathic requires you to become empathic. And what's interesting is when you really delve into that question, you recognize very quickly that it's through our experiences in life from -9 months all the way until our deathbed that we become more or less empowered. So this idea of becoming empowered is something that starts in the womb. And it's also interesting to think then about who is it who influences those experiences through which we become more or less empowered. Let's try the software again. Who is it who most directly influences the experience of young people? And therefore, who is it who directly influences the becoming empowered of a young person. 1 minute again in pairs. Okay, you ready? Make it loud again so that we don't have to repeat this. The software's still being prototyped, so on 4. 1, 2, 3. Right, good. Who was slightly late there off the beat? But you got heard anyway. That's the benefit. Okay, who is it? Well, again, in almost every place on earth, you get the same kinds of people coming up in this question. Educators, certainly. Parents, families are big. Peers, health workers, social workers, community leaders, religious leaders in lots of places. And of course, advertisers, culture makers. It's quite interesting when you talk about advertisers as direct influencers. Often people think of the negative influences that are very dominant in lots of lives for young people around the world. So these are the people who have a direct influence on empowering young people to live for a better world. Now, not many of these people are particularly thinking about their influence on the empowerment of young people. This seems to be something that needs to be fundamentally changed in our societies and in our education systems, an increased awareness of one's influence on the empowerment of young people. Now, if you think systemically, and if our aim, and with Ashoka, this is our aim, it's to start to shift systems so that all of these actors are doing more to empower more people to live for a better world. We need to think about who sits behind these frontline actors. Who is it who's influencing these people and therefore influencing the empowerment of young people? So again, this is the last time we'll do this. In pairs, who is it who sits behind the teacher, the parent, etc., in influencing them, who in turn influences young people? Just 1 minute. Okay. Are you ready? So make this loud because this is sometimes a bit more difficult. On 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, brilliant. This is usually what comes up, and I heard all of these terms, and there were a couple of others. Teacher training institutions, teaching unions, school leaders, university admissions people are often a very substantial influence in the system. Assessors and assessments are a big influencer. Policymakers, businesses, employers, media providers, etc. So again, often hidden in the education system are a set of people who are hugely influential on the experience of young people and therefore on the empowerment of young people or not. Now, there are typically in most systems, in most cities and countries, people who are doing brilliant work, both as a frontline educator, frontline influencer, and as a secondary systemic influencer. But even where there are great people doing great work, typically they're very disconnected from one another. They're often competitive and not collaborating. And often they're not really being very systemic in their work. They might be doing brilliant work with young people, but not really changing the system so that every young person going into the future will become empowered. So what we believe we need to do, and this is now getting to the heart of our approach to changing systems, is we need to align these change leaders, these people who want to be systemic. We need to help them collaborate, sharing objectives, sharing resources, sharing processes and opportunities. And we need to help them become more and more systemic in their work. And essentially, we need to bring these people into circles and grow what we call learning ecosystems of frontline actors and second-line systemic players. Learning ecosystems that are centrally focused on empowering everyone to live for a better world. And this process of creating learning ecosystems we call weaving learning ecosystems. We think there is a very special place for those people who are responsible for weaving together communities, teams, and circles of actors who are bringing to life this idea of learning ecosystems that empower everyone to live for a better world. Thank you.